Our Planet Radio.
Welcome to another dimension, a dimension of insight, a dimension of understanding. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth. There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is Off Planet Radio.
Well, good evening and welcome to Off Planet Radio Live. I'm Randy Maugans, broadcasting on the Liberty Beacon Media Network at tlbtowncrier.com. And it is the 31st of October, 2014. It is Halloween, All Hallows Eve, Samhain in the Celtic and Gaelic traditions, and the night, I guess, when many people celebrate the time of the saints, the descended, those in the outer realms. And in a weird kind of way, I guess this show tonight will sort of fit that model a little bit, because we're going to talk about things that have to do with spirituality. We're not going to talk about Ebola. We're not going to talk about ISIS. We're not going to talk about the buffoon in the White House. Freudian slip there. I think we need to balance our lives away from the mundane things of politics and economics and all of that, and dig a little bit deeper into ourselves. And to that end, this show always attempts to bring in the spiritual aspects of even the seemingly most boring and mundane details. And by no means do I assert that what we're going to talk about is mundane, because this is important stuff. Those who heard my Robert Stanley interview a few months ago know that I'm extremely interested in the topic of the Archons, the Aeons, the dark side of the spiritual underpinnings of this world, and what is the influences that dominate our consciousness in the present age. Our religious experience doesn't really lend itself a whole lot to a deeper understanding. Those who come from Judeo-Christian backgrounds know that there are huge gaps in our understanding. My guest tonight is somebody that I certainly consider to be one of the leading scholars in the field of ancient religious texts. He is a writer. He is a publisher. His publishing company is Fifth Estate Publishing, and the website is fifthestatepub.com. He has published now over 100 texts as an author, as a publisher, and under a number of different umbrellas in terms of subject matter. But his work lies largely in exposing the forbidden, ancient, expunged, hidden texts, taking ancient manuscripts and bringing them into the modern era so that we can read and understand what was written and what has been lost in our traditions. I want to welcome for the first time to Off Planet Radio my guest tonight, Dr. Joseph Lumpkin. Welcome.
Thank you, Randy. Very good to be with you again.
It's great. Yeah, a lot of people don't know who hear this show that you and I have actually done many shows over the years that we've known each other, and that those shows are on the threshing floor. You can find those over at threshingfloor-radio.com, the archive. But for this audience, Joseph, we kind of delve into a lot of things that are in the realm of deep spirituality, I'd say the more exotic, esoteric aspects of it. And you have published an enormous volume of work that covers what we'll just call as an umbrella Gnosticism. And what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to go into the underpinnings of Gnosticism and how that gets us to understanding more about subjects such as the fallen angels, the Archons, and the various other spiritual entities that are not really discussed in Christianity at all.
Right. So first, I guess we should address our Gnostic friends and say, please don't write us because we have left something out. Just drop us a note if you want us to include it on the next show, because this will be an overview of Gnosticism, which is an amazingly complex system. Gnosticism, in part, wants to take a look and answer some questions that aren't answered by what would be called orthodox or mainstream Christianity. They have a different view of the creation and cosmology, and it can be very, very complex. But I've been thinking about this, and I want us to look at this almost like energy, because it'll make sense if you're into electronics or ham radio or whatever you're into. If you understand music, then you'll understand harmonics. And as you get away from the main tone or source of energy, the harmonic tends to drop in power. And if you'll keep that in mind for the first 15 minutes or so, a lot of this will make sense. So shall we begin?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the things we have to bear in mind here, and something that I'll just point out up front, is Gnosticism itself actually precedes Christianity. Is that correct?
It does. In an odd way, it does. It is formulated partly off of Plato's cosmology. And what you have to keep in mind is, just as Christianity itself was being reinterpreted through pagan eyes or through Jewish eyes or whatever eyes, you also have Christianity being interpreted through the eyes of Plato's Gnosticism. And if you'll keep that kind of in your mind, and you know that the first century Jewish Christians were so different than the pagan Christians that emerged as kind of an orthodox Christianity, and that's going to be just as different as the Gnostic Christians. But they all considered themselves to be very, very Christian.
Yeah, this is a weird thing, and it goes into what early on, when you and I first met, I was kind of making a transition away from what I would call traditional Orthodox Christian worldviews and moving more into some of the texts that you were publishing, as part of Fifth Estate. And that transition is a hairpin turn for people who don't understand that this was Gnosticism was basically proscribed by the Vatican. It was later almost expunged and extinguished. You have the story of the Albigensians, the Cathars, who were part of purges that were done by the early Roman Catholic Church in order to get rid of some very inconvenient beliefs that were not inside of their orthodoxy. So for me, this is like a kind of a way to extend. I've said to you before, Joseph, we don't really have a cosmology in a traditional Christian sense. We have a scattering of books in the Old Testament that give us a tiny glimpse into creation, but we really don't have the underpinnings in terms of a spiritual cosmology. So maybe all of that kind of helps to filter into the narrative that you're going to provide on this.
Well, I hope so. If you look at the Didache, the first, let's call it the first book on Christianity, how to become and be a Christian in the first 30 years or so of Christianity, there was a lot of discussion as to what Jesus was, and in that book you find no reference to the Trinity or Jesus being born of a supernatural, sin-free, immaculate conception. So all of this has evolved over the first, say, 100 years. Just as that has evolved, so has the Gnostic beliefs. They want to answer a question that doesn't make any sense in Orthodox Christianity. And the main question they're trying to answer is, why is this world, this cosmos, and they use that word as being system, why is the system so broken? Why is there a hole in the world and the good is running out? What is happening that keeps the system here, Earth and all of the physical features of it, in such a chaotic and wrong state? And so their cosmology is not God created the world in 6 days. It is that there was a single unified God who, through his thought, his meditation, emanated an energy that created a female counterpart to him called Barbello. Now, before we go spinning off into, oh, that's ridiculous, let us keep in mind that the early Christians and the Jews, especially the early Jews, understood this because we have Father and Holy Spirit, and that Holy Spirit's name is Ruach in the original text. You know, if you can call any text original, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The Ruach is a female form, so the Spirit of God that created and hovered over the water, that nurtured things, was a female entity, a female form of the Godhead in the very beginning of Judaism. It's kind of been lost, but that's the case. So Barbello takes that place, and she, through this idea of cooperation and dominion, being that there was a male and female, gave rise to Sophia. Sophia in the Old Testament was actually considered to be the wife of God. If you read some of the books of, say, Proverbs and the like, it actually says that this is the consort of God.
Wisdom.
And wisdom, that's right. Wisdom is the consort of God, and that is Sophia. That's the name, the meaning of the word. And we have problems, of course, in the text, deciding what is a word and what is a title or an attribute. We took a lot of the female energy, if you will, out of the scriptures. John apparently was addressing one of his books to the elect lady. That's how it's interpreted.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's an actual name. And the name she went under was Electa, and she was an actual person. So that's what we're dealing with when we deal with Ruach being the spirit. And so there's Barbello, and then there is Sophia, that is wisdom, and she is considered a kind of entity herself. And this is where the story gets kind of fascinating. So she wanted to know God, but she was once removed. And she took it upon herself to try to do what God does. So she created. But she forgot two things. There was another entity created that was supposed to be her companion, and that was the Christ Spirit. And since everything in Gnosticism is paired up, male and female, yin and yang, it's a balance. They are really, really into the fact that there is male and female energies that give you dominion and power and balance. And so in Gnosticism, the female is never taken down, done away with, or tried to disappear from the scene the way that we have done in Christianity. Women have been pushed back in Orthodox Christianity. It wasn't that case in Gnosticism. So she did not pair with Christ. She did not ask the permission or consent of God. So she had no foreknowledge of what was going to come. And when she created what she created, we have the Archons. Now, up to that point, we had aeons, which are they're considered to be angels, and there's wisdom, and there's foreknowledge, and there's compassion, and love, and mercy, and all of these different attributes that we consider to be kind of non-corporeal, but in the Gnostic matrix, they're actually beings. They're angels. Mm-hmm. And Sophia was one of these. And when she created this system of individuals called Archons, which are referred to in the Bible by Paul when he says, we fight against rulers in high places. And that word is Archon. So we have a reference there to Archon being the rulers of this cosmos, this world in high places. Now, the name of the supreme Archon is Yaldabaoth. And Yaldabaoth and his minions were a distorted view. They were incomplete. They were not whole. And she saw this, and she immediately cast them away. She threw them away. Now, the veil that they lived in was called the pleroma, and the pleroma is what we would consider to be heaven. And she threw them beyond the veil. And when they awoke, they looked around and saw that they were alone. And being arrogant and stupid, they woke up and they looked and they said, we're alone. We must be God. And so Yaldabaoth took it upon himself to create what we now know as the physical universe, the physical world. Yaldabaoth was insane, unwhole, incomplete, arrogant, foolish. And so in the Gnostic cosmology of things, in an attempt to answer the question as to why the world is so broken, there in a nutshell is the cosmology, cause and effect, that the world is the way it is because the creator of this world, not God, but the Archon Yaldabaoth, is insane. Now, you might think, well, that's just an incredible story. And it is. But you have to understand that cosmologies don't have to be truth. I know of several Christians, many Christians, who say, no, I don't believe that God created everything in 6 literal days. I believe that there is this ongoing evolution. But that cosmology answers a question of how we got here. Just as the Gnostic cosmology answers a question, why are we here? And how did things get so bad? Follow me so far?
Yeah, absolutely. It invites a lot of questions, but I want you to stay with the narrative here because this is not something that you're going to hear in a church on Sunday morning. It's not what's taught by the monotheistic religious structures of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So let's explore the narrative.
So let's go back to why the Orthodox or mainstream Christian church believes that things were so bad here. They believe that we took a fall, that Adam and Eve ate the fruit, and from this fruit all evil began because they disobeyed God. On the surface, it seems correct, and it gives rise to what is called original sin.
Yeah.
However, most of the Christian community really, if you pin them down, don't truly believe in original sin. And I'll give you a reason or two why. But first of all, it violates another concept in the Scriptures that the sin of the father can't be visited upon the son. That's illegal in Jewish custom and doesn't hold up with original sin because the sins of Adam and Eve could not therefore be visited upon their children. That's the first problem. And when you approach it that way, most priests go, well, never thought of it that way. But it is what it is. The second thing is, if we really believe in original sin, then we must take all children who were born and had not received Christ and been baptized, or at least had not received Christ and testified that they had, they would be shot straight to hell when they die.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, St. Augustine believed this so much that he stood up and basically said, this has to be the truth. All children, if they're not baptized, they die and they go to hell.
A doctrine that's still held to today by the Catholic Church.
Right. So the Catholic Church, because they believed in that, and they said, the public will never buy off on this, they created limbo. And limbo was a place where all of the dead children that were unbaptized went, because they really hadn't committed a sin, but they died in original sin, so they couldn't go to heaven. So they floated around in limbo all this time, until about 3 or 4 years ago, when the Catholic Church said, oh, we're revoking limbo, and we have all confidence that these children will go to heaven. And then people like myself stood up and went, wait, what about original sin?
Yeah.
Well, see, the Orthodox Church, which I believe is as old, if not older, than the Catholic Church, because, of course, they stayed one church until the Great Schism.
Absolutely, yeah.
They don't believe in original sin.
No.
They believe that we are, faulty and that we will sin eventually, but until we sin, we are not sinners. Now, that's more of what I believe. I refuse original sin just on a personal stake, because I don't believe that Adam has anything to do with my state of affairs. But
and Joseph, it violates something else that's a very important principle here. In fact, it creates an incredibly intense problem: free will. If we are capable of free will, which apparently would be even the election of faith itself, then we can't be guilty of original sin, because that's fate. That's fatalism at its core.
It is. It truly is, and it gives rise to another problem that's a little bit more subtle and deeper. We are told to love others as we love ourselves,
yes.
But then we're told we are worms and unworthy, and we're all sinners, and so we carry this guilt and shame with us. And don't get me wrong, we should be shameful of the bad that we do to others, but we should not go around, I don't think, believing that we are, by our very, very existence, damned to hell. So, here we are. We have this Old Testament God called Yahweh, and he is a violent, sometimes brutal, and sometimes cruel God.
Jealous. Don't forget jealous.
Jealous. We have a New Testament God who is kind, warm, loving, accepting, forgiving. And it is the other problem addressed by Gnosticism that they said, yeah, that makes sense. See, Yaldabaoth is Yahweh. Mm-hmm. And so the insane creator God of this world ties to Yahweh of the Old Testament, because they did not believe that the Old Testament God was the same as the God preached by Jesus. They believed that the God preached by Jesus was the original person, thing, entity, deity that emanated all of the other Archons, and who was the unity, the one, before Yaldabaoth. And so, in Gnosticism, the purpose of Jesus coming to earth, the Christ Spirit, was to reveal to us and therefore save us, because their idea of salvation is coming to the knowledge of this,
right?
To reveal to us that we are trapped in this world that keeps us so busy, so maligned, so preoccupied, and so beat down that we do not look up above Yaldabaoth, that we are trapped in this mortal coil and in this dying, broken world, and we are kept away from the knowledge that there is something beyond this, and that if we understand that, and we refuse to serve the world system, and we reject this Yaldabaoth and his creation, that we could reach above and reunite with the One. But all of that is done through a transcendent knowledge. Not faith, but faith in that knowledge that Jesus is here to peel off the dust from our eyes and let us see how broken this is and how the God of the Old Testament has led us into a state where we are on that hamster wheel, and all we can think about is fixing the stuff that breaks, and we never look at ourselves.
And I think if you look at the world right now, what you just articulated there is exactly what I think. Knowing all of this, I still feel so. I think everybody feels this. I mean, we're in a time of darkness. We're in a time when it appears as though humanity is just teetering on the brink of one disaster after another. There's no wisdom anymore. We don't have leaders. We don't have a traditional societal structure anymore. That's all being imploded. And for a lot of people right now, they know that religion doesn't address this. And I think, that's why this is so important, because there's a hopelessness out there in the world. I see it every day that says there's got to be another way to look at this, because I'm not getting the answers that I need from what I learned in Sunday school.
Yes, I believe that that the church has failed. It has failed to nurture the soul. It has failed to provide answers. It's failed for a lot of reasons. I have an employee whose husband died not long ago, and the good church people are telling her, "Oh, you shouldn't feel like that. He's in a better place." And she said to me, "What better place could he possibly be, if not with his family?" And they're telling her, of course, have faith and get over it. Well, it takes 3 to 5 years to even start to get over that kind of grief. We've cheapened ourselves. Everybody likes a good show, but the answers are not being provided. But this goes into another discussion altogether. The problem, partly, let me digress just a second and say, it doesn't matter if your cosmology is historically correct. It's a myth. Mm-hmm. And the myth provides answers on a level that is subconscious. And that's what a good myth is, whether it's Star Wars or the Creation Saga. It's supposed to provide answers and give you some insight into what to do next.
This is actually the work that Joseph Campbell did for many years so marvelously in his work with mythology. Because people look at mythology, they think it's false. They say, well, if you say that's a myth, that is very insulting to people. And I know you're going to explain this in more detail. A mythology, even though it may not be historically true, contains within it exactly where I think you're going to go next, and that has to do with archetypes and an understanding of our inner landscape and our inner cosmology.
We have been together too long. It's like
we kind of know each other. Yeah, we're just like a married couple now. We finish each other's thoughts.
That's right. So yes, there's a book that I'll tout called The Gnostic Gospel of Thomas: Wholeness, Enlightenment, and Individuation. Individuation is a term that Carl Jung took from Aristotle to mean to come together with the different parts of your psyche and to be a complete and whole functioning individual. Carl Jung could not find anything to draw from what he considered to be mainstream Christianity. But in his work on archetypes, he did find a lot of meat in the mythos of the Gnostics. Because, see, we have these players. Now, before I begin, I'll explain that Yaldabaoth has a title called the Demiurge. And the Demiurge, according to how you break it down and parse the word, means half-maker, half-made, craftsman. I reject craftsman, by the way. It doesn't even make any sense. I tend to think it probably means half-made or half-maker. Think of it this way. Quasimodo is a cognate of a French term that means half-made. Mm-hmm. So you have a spiritual Quasimodo as the maker of this cosmos. But what Carl Jung said, and I'll paraphrase because it gets pretty long, he said, we are Sophia. We wish to create, but we did not wait to unite with God. We wish to create, but we did not seek our other half. We are Sophia, who is wisdom but disconnected. She created outside a state of wholeness, and therefore her creation was destructive. We are Sophia. We want to be whole and connected. We gave Adam spirit, and we raised him out of his worm-like state, and that's what we want to do to ourselves. We are the Demiurge. We are blind in our own limitations. We are arrogant. We are lost. We may have the divine spark within us, but we can't use it until we see the truth. And until then, we misuse our gift. We are our own God, ignoring the warnings of those most wise. And as the Demiurge, whose name is Yaldabaoth, we ignore Sophia, his own mother, his wisdom. And we are not alone. We are Samael. We are blind, a blind God, and so blind and arrogant that we do not realize that we are not united with our Creator. We are not whole, and we are not God. We are the Christ Spirit, not only whole and restored, but now anointed and sent from the source to aid others on our path back to the divine flame of Gnosis. It was an idea of integration and wholeness that Jung gleaned from Gnosticism that he called individuation. And we are born of the wisdom yet unrealized, and of the divine power yet undiscovered. And we are created, even though outside the fullness, we have the fullness within us, waiting and calling. Deep within us, there is a divine discontent. We are homesick for a place beyond where we are now that we have not seen, and we struggle to get back there. And that is my interpretation of what Jung was dealing with these archetypes of Gnosticism.
Yeah, he's basically addressing what I guess we would call the biggest question we ever have. Who are we? How did we get here? And why are things so messed up? Why do we have this yearning inside of us? Why do we have this brokenness in our world, which seems to condemn us, but yet at the same time we don't really have a direct causation linking to ourselves. It's almost like I used to call it the malevolent universe. Basically, you were thrust into a malevolent universe, naked, literally, and unknowing, literally, and somehow or another, in the course of this life, we had to reckon with who we were and why we were here, which, goes deep into existentialism.
Absolutely. There's a program on, I've never watched it because I thought it was just so silly, but it kind of reminds me of the Naked and Afraid or Naked and Alone or whatever the series is. And that is what we are. But we don't have to stay there. That's the thrust of Gnosticism, the voice reaching out from Gnosticism is that there is a gnosis, a knowledge that can divinely come in and reveal that we are not alone, that this is an illusion, that if we can sit down and stop all of this, and when the dust settles, we will know our divinity. And that's not to say, that we can, I don't know our limitations. I do not know. We say that Jesus is God and the Trinity exists in Orthodox Christianity, but Jesus tells us that we can do more than he did. More and greater things will you do than this, he said. So we have to really kind of make a decision here, which is true. And we're getting two very, very different messages from the Bible, because either we are divine or he is human, because if we can do more than he did, then there must be this spark of divinity in us. Because I do believe that there is a Christ spirit and that he was here to reveal this to us. But it also then means that we have that Christ spirit in us. And what we are waiting for, yearning for, is the knowledge of how to awaken that. How do you awake Christ within you? What effect is this awakening? And where do we go from here? That's the question that Gnostics asks. Are we going to be Aeons or Archons? There's the question for you. Are we going to be angels or demons?
And that was exactly where I wanted you to go next, because understanding the Archons can be kind of abstract until you get into the context of it. The Archons themselves appear to be malevolent. They appear to mirror and shadow. First off, we have to deal with the fact that there is not a monotheistic construct in the Old Testament. We have apparitions of multiple deities in the Old Testament. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of hidden in there unless you just read it for what it is.
It's exactly hidden in there. It's hidden in there by obfuscation of language, basically.
Yes. It comes out in these drips and drabs. For example, you get a full gulp of it when you read, say, Psalms 82.
Yeah.
God stands in the pantheon of gods. But we also get drips of it when it says, "Oh, you, God, are above all gods. You are the King of kings, the Lord of lords, and the God of gods." Well, okay. If there weren't other gods, they couldn't say that. And most people will go, well, that's just, don't make any other god. Don't worship money or don't worship fame or whatever. That's not what that meant. They didn't really have all that problem of fame back in the day. It is what it says. You are King of kings, Lord of lords. You are above all gods, O God, which meant that there were other lords, other kings in high places, and other gods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a conflict in identities right up front that then creates this turbulence in the narrative. You go into the New Testament, and again, there's all these attempts that have been done by the various seminaries over the years and theological positions of trying to, quote, harmonize things, but you really can't harmonize things that are in direct conflict. And that's the problem that we have with theology.
Right. Excuse me. So, in the beginning, we had this idea of El and Yahweh coming together, and we can go in, I guess, if we want to some, let's call it the evolution of God.
Yep.
El was a Canaanite god. He was a bull god, and he was taken, kind of adopted by the Jews who lived right next door, and they became, their god, and that's why we had the golden calf and all of that stuff. But that was a symbol of El, and you had Yahweh. Yahweh, as it turns out, is listed in one of the old documents as being the son of El, along with half a dozen others like Baal and some other deities that have been maligned and are now considered evil. So the people who worship Baal and the people who worshiped Yahweh were, my God's better than your God. Well, the winner always takes all. So as they were absorbed, their god was maligned and eventually put on a back shelf and eventually became a demon. But that's not the way it was in the very beginning. They were kind of they were together and kind of equal in the society at the time. So then you had this idea of Yahweh being the son of El, and they divided out the lands in this myth. And Yahweh was the God of the Israelite people. Look at it like the Athens city-states having their own gods per city. Mm-hmm. So then you had this idea of they were equal, and they came together. And by the time we got the Old Testament kind of standardized and codified, then they were considered to be the same. So this is very, very thumbnail sketch, very quick sketch of how the Old Testament God has two names in the Old Testament of Elohim and Yahweh. But I might mention, of course, that Elohim is, and always will be, no matter how you cut it, a plural.
Absolutely.
So El is the name of the God, and El was the name of the Canaanite deity at the time.
Yeah. Let us create man in our image.
Yes. And, Jung said, and it's a Gnostic idea also, that God created man and man created God, and it's a circular thing. And so whatever you can conceive of, whatever you can think about, whatever you can sense, whatever is in your mind, that's not God. That is a creation, not the creator. And the Book of Unknowing, the Cloud of Unknowing, written, I think, in about the 1300s, basically by a bunch of Christian mystics, said, if you sit down and you get rid of everything, when your mind is clear, there's nothing exists, God's there. That sounds a whole lot like enlightenment in the Zen Buddhist way of thinking about things.
Yes, it absolutely does.
So I believe that within us is this divine spark, and if we clear out all of our rituals and all of our religion, and we get down to the nuts and bolts of that divine spark within us, we get rid of everything that we can conceive of, because if you can conceive of it, it's a creation of either your mind or God. Then what's left beyond that creation is God.
I think one of the conversations that you and I have had over the years is this concept. One of the things that religion does is it tends to, I'll say, ossify a belief structure so that basically you're raised in a faith, and that faith is handed down from generation to generation. And in most cases, it's a very rigid structure. There's not a lot of questioning of authority. It is what you believe because you believe because you believe. But you and I tend in our thinking, and I know that in your writing and the work that you've done, tend to support a more, I use the term advisedly, evolutionary process of spirituality, of growing, that this isn't a stagnant, static system. It's a dynamic, fluid belief structure.
Right. So we really shoot ourselves in the foot, don't we? We have these radio talks, and we have these books that we have written, and we have these video and audio archives. Mm-hmm. And so inevitably somebody is going to say, yeah, but you said last year or 2 years ago, blah, blah. And we will have to say, yeah, but that's before I learned the following.
Well, I have that problem. I've had to eat portions of almost 7 years of work that I did. I looked back at what I had done, and I'm certainly not ashamed of that work. But it was a place and time based on what I knew and understood then. A lot of it now is informed by a much broader base. And I'd like to think a more expansive view of not just the theological, but the philosophical and the cosmological underpinnings of all of this as well. We're dynamic, fluid human beings, and When you and I have talked about the different ages, we've noted that, there are epochs in the rise and fall of different religious systems. So it's clearly a model that kind of works on a macro and micro level as well.
It absolutely does. And everything in my head could be wrong. It's just a matter of perspective. And you hope that as old as we are, well, as old as I am, the perspective would be a little bit broader than it was when I was 20 and thought everything was black and white. I shudder to think how arrogant I was back in the day when I was completely, totally taken by fundamentalism. Mm-hmm. And, we had an advisor that I rely on called Wanda Adam, and Wanda gets visited by our Mormon brethren quite a lot because they really want to convert her. And the first thing he said today when they visited Wanda was, has Joseph written any more of those books to mislead people? And she said, well, we are working on a book right now. And, of course, he just stopped because he didn't know that Wanda advises me on a lot of my writing. But that is the idea as to, Voltaire said this. Voltaire said, if you want to know what controls you or who controls you, then think about anyone or anything you can't criticize.
Yeah.
Right. So there you go. If you cannot criticize your religion or your church or whatever's in your community or in your life, you are being controlled by that. That is tyranny at its highest level. Our government is getting that way. Our religion has been that way and is becoming worse. And any fundamentalist, be it Christian or Muslim, who cannot criticize and step away from their religion without being tormented or tortured or killed, you're being controlled by it. Religion is evil. Spirituality is the thing.
Yeah.
That is the thing you wish. You want to get away from religion because no construct can be correct. It's like the old idea of thinking of God as an elephant and we're blind men, right? You grab the trunk, you think
right.
It's a snake. You grab the tail, you think it's a rope. You grab the leg, you think it's a tree. No one has it right because we are finite creatures grasping at an infinite idea, and any religion is going to be inherently incorrect or, better yet, incomplete.
Is it this gnosis, this knowledge, this understanding that stands between us and just being completely taken over by the malevolence of the Archons, this evil toxic system? I mean, are we literally now dancing in the dragon's jaws in terms of a war between good and evil? The quick answer is yes, we are. But here's the problem: the world itself and the constructs of it are all evil. It's broken. So you have to ask yourself, where is the good? And the good only resides in that Christ spirit within us, because everything else here is gone. It was created bad and it's getting worse. And the only chance that we have is for the sleeper to awaken. Uh-huh. I need to say that again because I need to drive it home. Yeah.
The only chance we have of saving this world is for the sleeper in us to awaken. Once that happens, a convergence will begin. But it's flame by flame, light by light, spirit by spirit, until the fire is here again.
So this actually is, in a sense, a shift in consciousness, first on the individual level, and then, I guess, radiating out into the larger pool of humanity.
Yes, in the oldest Jewish mythos, we are flames spit from that fire, from that one unified, constant, creative fire. And when all of the sparks return home, we'll be okay again.
That's actually profound beyond what I can even imagine right now. I'm just kind of chewing on that for a moment, because it really does seem that, I guess I'm no different than anybody else. I shift back and forth between what I consider myself to be largely an optimistic person, but the more I look at this world and the older I guess I get more jaded and more impatient with humanity. The fact that we are living in a rapidly shifting, if not absolutely eroding culture, is disconcerting to me. And it's looking at it and going, is there an uptick in consciousness, or is this just the turbulence that comes before humanity, both micro and macro, makes this decision to shift? Are forces outside of us driving this, or are we driving this?
Well, I think we're caught up in the tidal wave of the forces that were created for this imperfect, unholy world. But the thing is, Gnosticism offers a bit of a hope, because we are dreaming dreams. We are having nightmares. We are in turmoil. And part of what Gnostics say is that when the soul starts to awaken, that's when the nightmares begin. You are fighting to find out what is beyond the veil, what is behind the curtain of all this. And so the soul becomes restless, and we long for something different. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says that he came and he found us drunk. And when we have completed this, when we have gotten tired of being drunk, and we come out of this stupor that we're in, then we'll understand why he came and what he's all about. The problem is that more and more people are pedaling faster and faster to go less and less far in this world. We're being taxed to death, drugged down into the abyss, and we are so involved in fighting for the next piece of bread on the table.
Materialism.
Yes. And it's set up so that we have really not a lot of choice, so we can become minimalist and get rid of a lot of it, and more and more people are. They're living in very small houses, and they're basically breaking away from the materialism. And that really is about the only hope that we have, is to try to escape this construct and get back to a place that we can sit down and quiet our minds and our spirits and look up.
One of the things that seems to underpin this battle within us and this war between spirituality and materialism, I think, is a concept that you go into to some degree in your work, the idea of this dualism. And that actually fits into the conversation of Gnosticism a little bit. Can you kind of address the dualistic viewpoint?
Well, let me take it back to the Old Testament. Adam and Eve, this gets kind of difficult, because, see, in the Gnostic viewpoint, Eve was the daughter of Sophia, and she came to awaken Adam. And because knowledge was good and it made you escape, that's why Yaldabaoth, or Yahweh, set up the problem of, you can't eat this fruit. If you eat this fruit, you'll die. And she came and she fed him the fruit of knowledge, and that was supposed to set him free. Mm-hmm. Because that's what Gnostics believe. You have knowledge of the construct and you're free of it. Okay, so, but anyway, I digress. Ask your question again and let me reprocess.
Okay, just simply the concept of dualism or duality. I'm not sure which is correct because there seems sometimes to be distinctions between the two, but what you term the dualistic viewpoint, the two principles.
Okay. You see it in the Gospel of Thomas a lot, but you see it in Gnosticism in general. Even the aeons were created in pairs. There is an idea in the Old Testament that Adam and Eve together had dominion. It wasn't one or the other. They needed both. They needed both because there were different energies. Gnostics believe that Adam was the mind, you might say, and Eve was the spirit. And therefore Eve was actually superior to Adam in the Gnostic construct. But it takes both. It takes logic and reason, and it takes emotion and intuition. And that's where Carl Jung got his archetypes. You have mental, physical, emotional, and intuitive. And they are male and female archetypes. Sit in a construct of, are you introvert or extrovert, but you must be one of these other four things. And that's part of where he got the dualism from, the duality of these archons, the duality of even the idea of Plato's split-apart theory, that we are at one time, in the very nature of our being, one unified individual, but when we are born into this construct, we are split apart into male and female parts, and we we go out to find our split apart, which we call our soulmate. So yes, there is a constant idea that you need the other part of you to be whole and to have dominion. Now, in the higher level of it, what that means is you must find all of that inside of yourself. You must find your female part inside of yourself. Ladies, you must find the male part inside of yourself. And this is the idea of individuation, to bring all of these together into one functioning, complete entity. One whole person.
I think that's a really good place to leave it for this time, because I look at the clock and I see, good God, we're running out of time. Tell us a little bit about, Joseph, your current work with Fifth Estate Publishing, some of the books that you're putting out, some of the work that you're doing right now.
Well, we've been blessed enough to have the books of Enoch on the best-selling list of wisdom literature and others for several months now, going on a couple of years off and on. It's really wonderful. The lost books of the Bible, but I guess I could, in a minute and a half, come out of the closet, so to speak. My wife is a teacher. We live in a very rural area, and so for the last few years I've been publishing under several names to keep everything kind of low-key and allow her to finish up and not be caught up in the Bible Belt fury here. But I've been publishing under the name Emmanuel Rapha. If you're interested in the idea of angels being otherworldly, I've been publishing under the name of Ann Burton, if you're interested in more occult areas. And if you're interested in alternative lifestyles such as polygamy, polyandry, things like this that occur in the Bible, polygamy was never spoken against in the Bible. That's right. The name is Daniel Young there. So books on polygamy, polyandry, things like that occur in other cultures and are mentioned in the Bible. Look for Daniel Young. So there you go. I've outed myself, and I hope that Lynn can forgive me.
Well, I think it's important that people understand that this is a very broad path that we're on. This is not, there is a straight and narrow in terms of I think, moral behavior and understanding, but at the same time, we perhaps have not been well served by limiting ourselves into our areas of inquiry, and that's kind of one of the things that I love about the work that you do with Fifth Estate Publishing. Give the website out one more time, Joseph, as we go out here.
It's www.fifthestatepub, FIFTHESTATEPUB.com. Or you can simply Google my name.
And you can also find him on Amazon as well. We'll be back again next week with another show. I'm Randy Maugans. This is Off Planet Radio. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Keep looking for it.
This is On Planet Radio.